Think about the hostages. 700 days I went to see one of those tunnels. After 5 minutes, I want to get out. Horrible conditions, and you think of the hostages being held there. So really just encouraging people, don't go with the mainstream. Don't just join a demonstration. Ask a question, who are you supporting? What are you supporting? No, there's people yelling globalized intifada. They have no idea what that means.
And joining me now in the studio to give us an update from the front lines of the war is IDF International Spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you very much for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. And we just saw Noah take apart some of the big lies, the big smears against Israel. I wanted to ask you, as a senior member of the IDF, how does it make you feel when you see those libels, such as genocide, for instance?
Well, this is what we're facing. We're facing, we like to say we're fighting in 7 fronts, 360 degrees around Israel, but we're also fighting in this front. And the problem is, as the famous saying goes, the lie can go halfway around the world before the truth can put their pants on. And that's what we're facing. And we have to be accurate. We have to make sure we check our facts. At the same time, stories can run against us, and it takes time to check. It takes time to prove. Sometimes it's hard to explain. And then the agenda and the opinion is already set. You know, just this weekend we had a case where this kid, a lot of people were posting this kid who was shaking the hand to the GHF worker. And this disgruntled...
GHF, I should say, is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
Right. Distributing food directly to the people of Gaza, 0% looting by Hamas. Very successful. And this disgruntled employee who was fired was telling stories about the idea of killing this kid who shook his hand. And the whole world was saying how horrible the IDF is. And now, a week and a half after, it was published that that kid was rescued out of Gaza. And because of all the fake news about him, he was at risk. Because his face was famous now, and Hamas was looking for him, didn't want him to be alive, so IDF can say we didn't kill him. And now, a few weeks after, it's published, he's safe and he's out of Gaza. And that day when he came, in the famous picture of him, he actually got food and went safely back home. So, and no one cares about it right now. No one's publishing corrections of the stories. All the big news outlets put out stories saying IDF killed a child who went to pick up food. No one put a correction yesterday when you saw him in a video saying, I'm out of Gaza. Thank you for everyone who's helping me. Thank you for the food. Thank you for taking me and my family out. I was at risk because of Hamas. They wanted to kill me. No one's talking about it. So that is what we're facing every day. It's a battlefield of its own. And in this battlefield, like the real battlefield, the numbers are against us.
Yeah, it certainly stretches the credibility of these mainstream news organizations, and it's a hard thing for you to have to deal with. This week we had the grim milestone of 700 days since October the 7th. When you look back at that and look at the war that's ensued since, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I think about is the sacrifice. I think about the people, young people, 20, 30, 40, that have left their families months at a time, left their jobs, some lost their job, all to put on a uniform, risk their lives and fight in the battlefield against terrorists to try and rescue hostages. I think of 900 soldiers that have fallen in the war. I think about my friends who left their wife with their young children and went to the battlefield, and they don't have to, they're reservists. And I think about the big sacrifice that Israelis made throughout this war and understand how significant that is. And that is the backbone of Israeli security. And at the same time, I'm thinking about the hostages. 700 days I went to see one of those tunnels. After 5 minutes, I want to get out. You can't breathe, it's dark, you can't stand upright, horrible conditions. And you think of the hostages being held there. 700 days underground, and you see the horrible images of them starving, Hamas starving our hostages, and every day matters. And that's why we're pushing forward and trying to make an effect as strong as possible, as quick as possible. When people around the world are thinking, why are we fighting? We're fighting because of this. We're fighting because our hostages in those horrible conditions in the hands of jihadi terrorists, and we have to do everything we can to bring them home.
And of course, that's part of the reason why the IDF is mounting a campaign now in Gaza City. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Hamas took advantage of the latest ceasefire. In January, we had a ceasefire, and we're very happy about that ceasefire because we were able to bring dozens of hostages home to reunite them with their families A lot of them were alive. We saw the images and everyone cried of joy together when that happened. But what Hamas did in that time, they took advantage of the civilians going back north and used that as a decoy, came back up north into Gaza City and created a stronghold where there's many, many terrorists there. There's a strategic tunnel network, and they're planning on carrying out more terror attacks against our civilians and trying to reform. We've done a great job dismantling Hamas. They've used the ceasefire in January, and in recent months have tried to reform together and create a threat against Israel. And what we're going to do is we're going to dismantle that threat again, as we've done in different places. And there's places in Gaza City, people don't know it. There's places in Gaza City we haven't been since the beginning of the war. So there's a lot of strategic tunnel networks, terrorist locations, infrastructure that we haven't seen, and we need to take care of that and to dismantle Hamas one step closer to defeat.
And there have been a lot of high-profile terrorists taken out in the last weeks, both in Gaza and in Yemen and in Lebanon. What can you tell us about some of those figures?
Well, Israel has a very clear policy, and the IDF is carrying out that policy. We will not let any terrorist that has the mean form on our borders and threaten our civilians, and we will act in a preemptive way. And with the Houthis, it's not necessarily preemptive, but it's one of the, in our history at least, but I think it's something on a global scale, one of the most impressive operations. Finding intelligence, carrying out a precise strike in real time, 2,000 kilometers away from Israel. This is an endeavor that, if you asked me 2 years ago, I wouldn't believe we were able to do.
This is intelligence, but you had the Houthi leadership all together. This presumably is relying on some pretty complex intelligence, pretty complex operation.
And I remind you, 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago even a year ago, people would ask, wait, Israel didn't prepare for the Houthis. We don't really have good intelligence on that. And to get from that place to a place where we can carry out an elimination of their senior leadership with intelligence in real time is one of the both execution by Air Force and intelligence collection by our intelligence directorate is something that's amazing, especially to think of the starting point where we were just a few months ago, where the Houthis were a front we weren't preparing for. We prepared for Hamas, we prepared for Hezbollah, we even prepared for Syria and Iran, but for the Houthis, we're not one of the fronts we were preparing. And to make a shift in such a short time to get to a level where we can eliminate their senior leadership. And I remind you, the Houthis are not a government. There's a Yemen government, there's a Yemen country, and then there's the Houthi terror regime. And that terror regime, many of the strongest countries in the world have been going after for over a decade. They came into power in the middle of the last decade. Saudi Arabia, US, France, England have been fighting them off because they're not just an Israeli problem. They're a global problem. They're trying to close off the maritime corridor, the Red Sea, which is 30% of global trade that goes by sea, goes through that corridor. And they've been sinking ships, kidnapping sailormen, killing people in the process. So the whole world has been trying to deal with this. And I think this is one of our greatest accomplishments in the last 2 years, this extremely precise, quick elimination 2,000 kilometers away from Israel is something that we haven't seen happen a lot in years before this October 7th war. But we have seen in recent months, and people are getting used to it. But it's something that is quite impressive to see from the inside and very significant, and hopefully has a long-term effect on encouraging the Houthis to leave the path of terror against us.
Incredible. What do you think is the biggest misconception about the IDF?
Well, I think the difference between how we operate and how people think of us is so hard that sometimes it's hard to explain. I've met, I won't say the name, but I met a significant political leader from around the world, came to Israel. And when I explained everything in detail, he said, the distance is too far from what you're saying to what I'm hearing. This is propaganda. So the way IDF is operating on the ground has no precedent in the world history in urban warfare. We have hundreds of people, thousands of people. Their job is to bring in aid, to monitor the humanitarian situation. Their job is to understand where people are and people aren't. Their job is to call people. There's actually human beings on our side calling people on the Gazan side, telling them, listen, please get out of this building. We need to attack this building because Hamas is hiding in the building. So I think the world has almost never seen a terror organization embed itself so successfully behind a civilian population, and has never seen a military go to such length to deal with that in the most humane way. You know, the world is speaking about Israel committing a genocide. When there was a polio outbreak, there was one incident of polio in Gaza. Everyone stopped everything. The chief in charge of the operations, the military operations, fighting terrorists in Gaza said, hold on. I need an officer from COGAD. You need to explain to me what we're doing, how we're working with the international community to prevent a polio outbreak. The people in Gaza, the children in Gaza, are the most vaccinated children to polio in the Middle East. Israel, alongside other partners, carried out an enormous campaign to make sure that the humanitarian conditions are met. There are over 2 million tons of aid that have entered Gaza in this war. That's around a ton per person. And yet the world is speaking about genocide, of Israel's starving population on purpose, and the distance is enormous. You're talking about Hamas coming in on October 7th. You know, there were almost 20,000 Gazans coming into Israel every day to work, because Israel's policy was trying to make life better for the Gazans. They entered through that same crossings, murdered the people working in the crossing that let the Gazans in every day, blew up the crossing, went further into Israel, murdered Israelis. And Israel responded. It took weeks and months, but Israel responded by spending a lot of money and people to fix those crossings and to bring food into Gaza. I was in Kerem Shalom, the main point of entry of aid into Gaza, a point where Hamas repeatedly fired rockets at. And this is the main point of entry of aid into Gaza. And you see the images of Hamas having feasts underground. And the people of Gaza, they do have difficulties. I recognize it. But there has never been a situation in which a terror organization is just left out of the conversation. And the blame is then transferred to a military doing acts that are unprecedented worldwide. And we're talking about millions of phone calls, SMS texts, leaflets, social media warnings. We are an army that in every step of the way have given up the element of surprise. You know, every 19-year-old soldier after 2 months in the military knows that the most important thing is the element of surprise. Everywhere the IDF goes, we announce, we are coming here. Please get out. And that announcement is not just to the people. Hamas hears that announcement. It makes our operations so much more difficult, but this is part of our values, part of how we operate. And yet the world is speaking about this is the worst genocide ever. Israel is starving people. I was in the crossings. You want to hear a crazy fact?
Yes.
For over 100 days now, also this day, there are hundreds of trucks worth in Gaza waiting for the international community to pick them up. Now, the amount of food that's waiting in Gaza is enough to feed the entire population of Gaza. For a day, for 2 days, for a week, for 2 weeks, depends on the amount that's mounted there, that's waiting for the international community to pick it up. There was a week in which the UN was really running a campaign against Israel, saying Israel is starving Gaza. There were almost 1,000 trucks worth inside Gaza waiting for the international community. Same people who were speaking about Israel starving. There's a chain. The chain goes, Israel approves and facilitates the entry of aid, and then it's the part of the international community to pick it up and distribute. Israel did their part. There was food, there was so much food in Gaza that was not being picked up and distributed that we had to slow down the pace of aid going into Gaza because of the international community. And at the same time, they were going out and interviewing and saying Israel's blocking food into Gaza. The head of OCHA, which is the UN Humanitarian coordinator, he was speaking about Israel blocking 10,000 trucks out of Gaza, which is completely fake. He's an official by the UN, while there's 1,000 trucks in Gaza waiting for him. And this has been the reality for over 100 days now, that the pace of aid going into Gaza is faster than the pace that the international community is picking it up. Israel has added the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, to the party. We have added private sector to this operations because the UN is just not in the same pace of the aid going in. And this is something that's been going on for months now. And at the same time that they're not picking up aid, they're saying Israel's blocking aid from going into Gaza. And I've been there, I've seen it with my own eyes. And you want to hear the craziest thing about this whole thing. For 5 days in a row, the UN picked up 0 trucks from within Gaza. It's already in Gaza waiting for them. 5 days in a row. On the 5th day, and we were being very patient and trying to work with them, and for 5 days they were campaigning against us publicly, saying we're blocking food. After 5 days, we came out and we said we're not blocking food. There's enough food to feed Gaza for more than a week, waiting for the UN to pick up. And the next week, within 3 days, they picked up 600 trucks worth. And nothing changed in our policy. The only thing that changed is that the world heard and learned that they were the ones that were not distributing the aid. So there's a huge problem here. And then reporters and people ask me, wait, so you're telling me the UN is wrong and the media is wrong and everyone's against you? And I think in some cases, it is much easier to say Israel's blocking food, this is the situation, instead of saying, listen, this is a war that's been going on for 2 years. This is one of the cases in which a terror organization has embedded itself behind civilians in the most successful way in history. And Israel's doing everything they can. And I think it's very easy to ignore that and just put very easy headlines. And I think it's also very easy for a lot of organizations that make money off of saying the situation is so bad, give us money. So I think there's a lot of that going on, and on the ground you see the Israeli efforts, and you see that the international community is not working at the same pace of the Israeli efforts.
Important that people know that, especially the people around the world funding all these efforts, know that actually it's the international organizations and the UN and others that are not facilitating the aid that's already there. We know, of course, that the only people being intentionally starved in Gaza are the hostages. And I remember when you spoke about the polio vaccinations, at that time, Hamas had child hostages in Gaza. So the only children in Gaza actually not being vaccinated against polio were the Israeli children they were holding as hostage. We work a lot on campus, as you know, and I saw that you recently wrote an open letter to students as they start the new academic year. What was your message?
Well, I actually had one of my soldiers who was a student in one of the big universities in the US and came to Israel and decided to leave her life and serve the military. I told her, right, tell me what you think. And so it was an open letter of her through me, through my platforms. And the main message was, you know, I did my bachelor's and my master's, and the main message is when you go out about a subject you don't know about, you study. You ask the hard questions. That's what you go to university for, to ask the hard questions, to understand where things went wrong, where you have prejudice, where you're just making your opinions about something that's complex without really understanding it, and just encouraging people. Also putting some facts, like the facts I told you right now, to explain how complex the situation is and what our efforts look like, but also really just encouraging people. Don't go with the mainstream. Don't just join a demonstration because there are 99,000 people there and you want to be the 100,000 person. Don't do that. Ask a question. Who are you supporting? What are you supporting? You know, there's people yelling globalize the intifada. They have no idea what that means. That means to globalize terror. That the idea of that terror is we will kill anyone who doesn't go by what we want, which is the jihadi Islam. And we were starting to see it worldwide. We're starting to see, and I have no problem with Islam. I'm speaking about extremist jihadi Islam that is rising worldwide, seeing this encouragement, saying globalize the intifada, and saying, okay, great, let's globalize it. So I think for young people, they need to understand, do they stand behind breaking into a sovereign country in a border that isn't disputed by anyone, kidnapping and killing children on a holy day for that people? Do they support Muslims holding other Muslims for hundreds of days in tunnel? Do they support the cold-blooded killing of babies with bare hands? Do they support firing rockets at children nonstop? Do they support turning schools into missile launching sites? Do they support all of that? And I think a lot of people, and I hope, and I tend to believe that a lot of people do not support that. They're just not aware what they're supporting when they're singing those chants in the streets and in the campuses.
And of course, there are many Jewish and non-Jewish supporters of Israel who are activists on campus and beyond. I wonder if we can end with a message to them as we head into this new Jewish year, new academic year, but in general, those who are really fighting the fight and taking that message to the wider public, maybe to our camera. So if you just look over there and tell the audience your message.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the people worldwide who support us. We hear you, and we know it's not simple standing up for what's right in this time. And I think what's most important for me as an IDF spokesperson to tell you is IDF is doing everything we can to fight this just war against jihadi terrorists, and doing everything we can to do it in the best way possible. Also to fight those terrorists out, but also to do everything we can to make sure that we're doing it according to humanitarian law, but more importantly, our values and your values. And I want to wish you all a happy holiday, and I hope for more peaceful days. And we're fighting this war because we have to. It's an existential war for us, and we thank you for your support worldwide. And seeing what's happening worldwide is actually really helps us understand why the state of Israel is so important, and why we need a country for us to be safe in. And our job is to make sure that the people in this country are safe, and that's what we're doing every day.
Thank you so much. I hope you'll channel that support to your soldiers on our behalf. We appreciate your eloquent voice to the world on behalf of Israel. Thank you so very much, Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani. Thank you.